Sleep is something we all do, and yet it's a bit of a mystery. How much do we really need? What happens when we sleep? And why is it sometimes so hard to achieve no matter how hard we try? These questions affect millions of people worldwide, impacting their health, life satisfaction and productivity. Perhaps you're one of them. Hi, I'm Sarah McGuinness, founder of Revolutionaries of Wellbeing. My mission is to end burnout culture for good. I'm supported by an amazing community of HR and health and safety professionals, people leaders and wellbeing champions who are all driving real change. They're passionate, just like you. In this podcast, we explore practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you enhance wellbeing in your workplace and in life. Today, we're exploring sleep with Bernice Tuffery, a sleep health advocate and author of Sleep Easy.
I was about early 40s and my sleep unravelled, and it did so in a quite radical way, to the point where I was averaging about 5 hours of broken sleep a night. I was eroding, very, very slowly eroding.
Bernice's journey from struggling with insomnia to becoming a sleep health coach is both inspiring and full of useful insights for anyone looking to improve their sleep. Whether you're a night owl, an early bird, or somewhere in between, this episode is packed with practical strategies to help you rethink your approach to sleep. It is hosted by my good friend and colleague Chris Hewitt. Let's dive in.
I was one of those really annoying good sleepers, and so I didn't think about sleep, gave it not a thought. And then I was about early 40s and my sleep unravelled, and it did so in a quite radical way, to the point where I was averaging about 5 hours of broken sleep a night. Obviously, that was not a good time, but like a good Kiwi, I toughed it out, kept soldiering on as you do. But it sort of reached that point where I realised that I was eroding, very, very slowly eroding. And, my work was suffering. I guess, my career had, let's say, plateaued. That was probably being kind. And I, my home life was suffering. My health was unraveling. It reached that point where it was just like, I'm not living wholeheartedly here. I am a hologram. And so that really frustrated me, because I'd done all the things that I thought I should do to improve my sleep, and they weren't working in any kind of sustainable way. And so I applied my research skills, because that was my career, that was my background, and found out that there is a way to sleep naturally. And so it's called cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, and it's a recognised gold standard treatment worldwide, and it's just not very accessible in New Zealand. So I applied myself in a DIY way and learned how to sleep. And look, it was so transformational that it really sparked my passion for sleep, and that's what really turned things so that I became a sleep health advocate. I've trained in cognitive behavioural therapy and health coaching. I got in touch with sleep specialists in New Zealand and Australia and said, look, we need a book on this, we need to get the word out. And under their beautiful mentorship, I wrote the self-help book, Sleep Easy, and that's out there now in New Zealand and Australia, and stretching further, we've been translated into Hungarian.
Brilliant.
And so this is what I do now, and it is something that is really, really close to my heart, because I know from lived experience the difference that a good night's sleep makes.
That's actually a really good segue, because I was going to say, so what's the impact that poor sleep quality has on our cognitive function, mood, and I guess overall performance and happiness in life?
They say that it pretty much affects every single aspect of our life. In terms of what happens in the workplace, the consequences are just massive. In terms of your absenteeism, you just don't show up, or you show up late. Then there's presenteeism, which I was 100% guilty of. I was there, but I wasn't 100% there. And so you've got things like, decreased productivity, your memory is impaired, your ability to focus, your ability to concentrate, all of those things are impacted. And so, if you're anything like me, I was just I was still trying to deliver what was required of me, but I was having to work so much harder to get there. And so that took its toll on other aspects of my life because it was taking me longer to get things done. In terms of your health, yes, it impacts your immunity. You're more likely to get any coughs and colds that are coming around, and also it means that it takes longer for you to bounce back from that. In terms of your mood, yes, it has an impact. In terms of anxiety, depression, it perpetuates those things or can actually set those things off. You're just less happy, you've got less energy. There's so many consequences, there really are.
And how prevalent do you know, like how many people go through and have these sleep challenges?
Well, it's really normal to have some times of poor sleep in your life, and that's a response to stress. There'll be something in your life that triggers it, and that's part of life, that's part of being human, but it's also normal to come back from that. So at any one time, we're sort of seeing about a third of adults in New Zealand having difficulty sleeping. Wow. So if it's not you, it's somebody very close to you that's struggling. And what tends to happen with sleep difficulties is that people tend to just tough it out alone. And so there's a lot of silence around your sleep difficulties, so it can be a really lonely experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you just maybe go into a little bit in terms of your own journey, I guess, in terms of finding an answer and going through the health system and some of the avenues that you went to try and seek out what was causing some of your difficulties?
Well, it was quite interesting because my first instinct was I don't want to take sleep medication. Because my perception was that it's going to make me feel groggy and it's going to be unhelpful. I'm not doing that. And so I was hitting the supplement stores and taking everything that I could lay my hands on, whether it was tart cherry or magnesium or just, they'd all have really great sounding names, and I'd try all these different things. But my insomnia had reached such a point that those supplements couldn't touch the sides of it. So they would be helpful alongside, but there was something else that I needed to be doing to fix that. But at that point, I didn't know what else I needed to be doing. And, I was doing all those sleep hygiene things that you hear about. It's like, be careful with your caffeine and, knock off the alcohol. And, there was, have a hot bath or don't have a hot bath. And, there was so many things that were going on that I would do. And I was becoming increasingly vigilant about my sleep. And I learned later that that kind of vigilance and hyperarousal actually perpetuates the problem.
Wow.
So, it's very normal for people with sleep difficulties to try very hard to improve their sleep. And the more they try with things that don't make a difference, it perpetuates the cycle. It makes them feel powerless. And so that puts them into a state of stress, and so they're less likely to sleep.
I was actually going to ask this later on, but I'm going to do it now. It's like, where do you stand on wearables? Because I've got, a Garmin watch, and one of the things that it does is it tracks the sleep of your health and how much REM sleep you have and how long it took you to go to sleep. And I eventually stopped wearing it at night because I'd wake up going, oh, I only slept X amount, I slept X amount less than I did the previous night, or it looks like I was only in light sleep for a lot of the night. And you get competitive about it, and it's something over which you have no control. So I eventually stopped wearing it. But also I appreciate that knowing some of this stuff can be helpful. Where do you stand on the usefulness of things like, whether it's a Fitbit or a Garmin or what have you?
That's such a great issue to raise, because this is what the sleep specialists are struggling with at the moment. It's sort of like, on the one hand, we've got access to these tools that can be really helpful, but on the other hand, they can be really counterproductive. So it's like what you've done is become self-aware and go, is this actually serving me, or is this making things worse? And making your call based on that. So for people that have quite healthy sleep, it can be very reassuring. It's like, yeah, rock on me. I've had 8.5 hours. I'm awesome. So that reinforces, what's working. But for those of us that were struggling with sleep, and seeing how bad your sleep was really creates more anxiety and more stress around it. And so that's not useful. So with those that do have ongoing insomnia, we sort of recommend, step away from the devices, step away from the devices.
There's nothing worse than when you're trying to go to sleep and you can't, and you start getting the anxiety of, I'm going to be a wreck the next day, or or if I'm wearing one of these, oh, my sleep performance is going to be terrible, and it really does become a self-fulfilling prophecy, or this vicious cycle when you start having sleep problems, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And then the more action that you take around it to help yourself, and then they don't work, and that creates this reaction of, I've tried everything and nothing works. And so you get that state where you're quite helpless and powerless, and you're stressed and you're worried about, I'm never going to be able to sleep. You catastrophize, ruminate, all of those unhelpful things. And so, of course, you don't sleep. And one of the other things that can occur is that you end up with an unhelpful association with your bed. Your bed becomes associated with wakefulness and stress, rather than being that beautiful haven that just is the cue for sleep.
Yeah,
that's not there anymore. So there's a number of things that are perpetuating the problem.
Wow. So I suppose let's go back a step and actually talk about what sleep is, because most of it, we just take it for granted. We go to bed, close our eyes, assuming we have somewhat healthy sleep. We go to sleep, we wake up, 7, 8 or whatever hours later. But what actually happens when we sleep? What goes on in our brains and our bodies, I guess?
This is a whole field of sleep science that I feel like I've got so much further to go on there. And sleep medicine is a young branch of medicine, it's only about 70 years old compared to the rest of medicine. So there's exciting breakthroughs happening there. What's really important to understand is that sleep is a non-negotiable. Humans do it. They need it. Every part of our biology requires us to sleep. And so our bodies do phenomenal things while we're sleeping in terms of, growing and healing. And this I found really fascinating, but it's almost like a cleansing system for your brain, so that you've got your memories are all sorted and filed on your behalf, and it sort of cleans up the some proteins that they're now associating with Alzheimer's. So that's good. let's do some spring cleaning overnight. And there's just so much going on. And so when we have insufficient sleep for extended periods of time, it takes a lot for our body to come back from that, and we've really got to look after our sleep.
Wow. So is that suggesting a potential link between chronic sleeplessness and insomnia and things like mental illness or Alzheimer's or things like that?
Yeah, there's definitely links being investigated in that regard. And also, like the downstream, I try not to get too scare tactics on this, because that's unhelpful. But the science is showing that long term, if we don't sort out our sleep, it does increase risks in terms of cancers and cardiovascular disease, and also the links with Alzheimer's and dementia. And mental health issues as well. So, we do really need to take care of our sleep and start prioritizing it and educating ourselves around it, because that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is that people will help themselves if they know how to help themselves. And that's a bit of a gap at the moment in terms of the science and the people.
Yeah. Because I guess one thing that I was reflecting on prior to the session is the fact that I guess sleep isn't uniform, that we have different needs of sleep at different points in our lives. So it's not one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely. And we tend to think in terms of how much sleep do I need? And the, general rule of thumb is, we should all get our 8 hours. And that's not quite accurate. Our sleep duration needs do change over time. But for most of us adults, pre-65, the recommended range is between 7 and 9 hours. If your body functions awesomely on 7 hours and you're pushing yourself to get 8 hours, it basically sets up performance anxiety. And you start going, oh, I'm not getting enough sleep. Well, actually, you're fine. Your body likes 7 hours. That's all that's required. Just have 7. Whereas if you're trying for 8, but your body needs 9, then you're always going to feel under par.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we spoke before, you talked about, like, for example, teenagers have different needs to sleep and their circadian rhythms are slightly different to adults. Can you share that?
Oh, it's been really interesting because I had focused on adult sleep, and now that my daughter has sort of hit her teenage years, and I'm seeing firsthand this radical shift in what they call a chronotype. So that's whether you're a morning lark or a night owl. And so she's now staying up way later than me. I just check out. It's my bedtime. I'm out of here. But yeah, teenagers, their body clocks shift there. And so what it means is that they're not tired and they're not sleepy until much later at night. And it's much more difficult for them to get up in the morning. And there was something that I read in one of the journals. It was about waking a teenager at 7 a.m. is like waking an adult at 4 a.m.
So for those
so that's why they're groggy and grunting.
So for those who are listening in who have teenagers, you may be familiar with the grunting beast from the other side of the door at 7 a.m. That's probably why.
Yeah. It's not their fault, it's their biology.
And then I guess when we reach the age where we maybe have kids of our own, does that then change? Does the act of becoming a parent and all of the months, if not years, of broken sleep that come with that, does that then change us again, or again, does it vary?
I think we're forced to change.
Yes.
So even if your natural chronotype is more night owl, the child rules what's going on in the household and you start adapting. So you just start conditioning yourself to their routine so that you can parent. But it is really challenging. It's a really challenging time for adults as parents when they are having to live by somebody else's sleep schedule.
I came across the concept of revenge bedtime. Did we talk about revenge bedtime before?
Well, no, what is
revenge bedtime? Okay, so this Google, it's quite good. It's when you have children and your children maybe go to bed a little bit later than they normally do or they should. Maybe you have young children and they normally go to bed and they're asleep by 8, but for whatever reason they're fussy, or you end up, you're out and you go back late. You come back late from coming out. The kids don't get to bed until 9 or 9:30, and then the parent ends up going to bed really late because they've finally got some time to themselves. Maybe they've been busy either at work or parenting or doing what have you during the day. The kids have gone to bed late, but then they go, no, I want some time to myself. I'm going to catch up on the program that I missed or do whatever. Then they go to bed late and they feel it the next day because they've taken, an hour or an hour and a half out of their sleep pattern to get some awake time for themselves. And that's called revenge bedtime.
Oh, and I definitely did that as well.
Absolutely.
And it's just, you just treasure a little bit of time for yourself. And I guess it's just about making that balance. It's sort of like, yes, I do need some time for myself, but I don't want the consequences of, undersleeping.
One of the other things around, I guess, the change of how humans are doing sleep and bedtime is technological. And I don't necessarily mean devices, but I mean, if you go back 10,000 years, we didn't really have we didn't have electric lighting, 200 years ago, and that's impacted our natural sort of DNA rhythms of when we go to sleep and wake up. I guess, are we biologically kind of still trying to play catch up?
It's a really interesting thing, because it's almost like we have been defying our biology for a long time, and at some point, there will be consequences, and Mother Nature, she's the one that ultimately has the upper hand. And you're absolutely right. It goes back to the invention of the electric light, and we started altering our what is daytime, what is nighttime. So we kept extending our daytime with the access to light. And once you understand the biology of sleep and how critical light is to determining, what your body clock is doing, then you realize that we really are messing with our sleep with light, whether it be from screens or just from electric lights in the house.
I want to touch on screens in a little bit, because I guess there's some really good sleep hygiene that comes with screens in the nighttime. I'm going to address a question that's come through, which is, what's the best way of determining what your individual ideal sleep hours are, like what your own needs are?
That's a really good question, and it is about giving yourself that opportunity to figure out what your body needs. And it's very difficult to figure that out, when we're kind of forced into the schedule of our work life. So it's something that's really helpful to have a look at during your holiday, and just allow yourself to go to bed when you feel sleepy and wake when your body wants to wake. And that way you're starting to get a sense of, well, what does my body feel fabulous on? So you want to be waking in the morning feeling like you're well rested, you're refreshed, and feeling ready for the day. And it's interesting to kind of get a sense of, what is the amount of sleep that my body performs really well on. And once you know that, you've got some choices.
Okay. We've touched on, or we've mentioned the word insomnia on a couple of occasions over the session. What is insomnia? Because it gets used a lot, but I guess what causes it, what drives it, what happens in our brains when we have insomnia?
It's really interesting to look at what insomnia is. Insomnia tends to be used as a kind of blanket term for kind of anything funky that's going on with your sleep. And yet, clinically, there's 7 different sleep disorders, and insomnia is just one of those. And insomnia some of the other sleep disorders will present as insomnia. So it's important to understand, what are we actually working with here? And actual insomnia means that you haven't, and it's self-assessed. So it's where you're having difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking early in the morning. You're not happy with the amount of sleep that you're getting or the quality of sleep that you're getting. And this is happening 3 or more times a week. And you are actually giving yourself sufficient opportunity to sleep. It's not one of the other sleep disorders. And it's affecting your daytime performance and your quality of life. So it's distressing you in some way. And so once you've fit those criteria and ruled out any other sleep disorders, that's when we're talking about actual insomnia. And there's what they call acute insomnia, which will last, a couple of weeks, a month. And that's really common, and it's typically triggered by some kind of event in your life. It might be a really stressful time in your life, or you may have moved house or had a child, or could be anything that's triggered it. But then once it goes beyond the month mark and it hasn't come right with the things that you've done to sort yourself out or to reduce the stress or whatever, that's when we're starting to move into a cycle that will perpetuate the insomnia. And you reach that point once you've hit the 3-month mark, that's when you've got chronic insomnia. And at that point, that's when you really need to take action to remedy the situation. And that's where cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia comes in and will help you find your way back.
So what is that for those who are unfamiliar with the term?
Okay, so CBTI is the evidence-based approach to treating insomnia. It's recognised internationally. It's effective for 70% of people. There are no side effects, and it's beautiful in that it's all natural. It's really about changing your thoughts and your habits around your sleep. So insomnia is actually a learned behaviour, which is beautiful because that means that you can unlearn it and learn more helpful things. So it's a really exciting field because it's even though we do have a shortage of practitioners in New Zealand, it is something that you can do yourself once you've got the right. And once you see the information, you just go, oh, well, now that I know and understand, I will do this differently.
What do you mean when you say insomnia is a learned behavior? Because I'm just thinking if there's anybody listening and going, I'm having real troubles with my sleep. I don't want this. I didn't learn to do this. What are you referring to?
Well, this was what I found so confronting when I learned about CBTI. It's like, what? I've been trying really hard. Yeah. I've been doing my best. I've been trying to sort my sleep out. And that's when it's like, oh, yeah, but I've been trying with the wrong information. So I've accidentally perpetuated my insomnia with the thoughts that I'm having and the behaviours that I have been implementing. So one of the really common things that people do to try and help themselves with when they've got deficient sleep is that they will extend their opportunity to sleep. So they will go to bed earlier and earlier, or they will sleep later, or they'll do a big catch up on the weekend, or they'll have long naps during the day. And by extending the opportunity to sleep, that is unhelpful. That works against our biology. So it makes it very, very difficult for our body to sleep. Or we will have broken sleep, or we will have short sleep, but we're in bed for a very long time. So we sleep very inefficiently.
So how much of this, and I guess the answer is probably going to be a little of both, but how much of this is biological, like brain chemistry versus mental? The way, because I sometimes have, I think it's called, busy brain, where I'm trying to sleep, but my brain is still going on all cylinders and I'm getting increasingly frustrated that I can't sleep. Is it neurochemical? Is it biological? Is it just mental? What's causing some of this, do you think?
Well, it's both of those things. Yeah. So we've got the behavioural things that are going on, but then there's also the psychological things going on. So our brains start getting worried that we're not sleeping. So we go into overdrive. We sort of basically put our bodies into that fight or flight state where we're going, my body really needs sleep, but I can't sleep, therefore. And so we go into panic mode. And so once your body has the stress response, it's not capable of falling asleep. And our busy mind that starts ruminating about, why has this happened to me? And I should have not had that coffee. And why did I do that? And da-da-da-da. Or it goes into catastrophizing about the consequences tomorrow. Oh my gosh, I was amazing at that. So it's both of those things. But in terms of the reversing that cycle, what they've found is it's the behavioural changes that typically have the most impact. So you get your quick wins with the behavioural changes, and then you start addressing the cognitive ones that remain.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on the behavioural changes because, and we've touched on very briefly the sleep hygiene factors, the things that we probably should just be putting in as part of our everyday routines to do kind of everything we can at a basic level to get good sleep. What would be some of those things that you would recommend as a starting point?
In terms of the basics, in terms, they call it sleep hygiene. the World Sleep Society has a kind of 10 commandments, and they are, it's 6 of them are around your daytime routine. So it's about having a consistent schedule. So if your sleep has gone haywire, get back to basics, get your routine, your schedule of your wake time and your sleep time, get those lined up and be consistent right across the week and the weekend. And so that's not forever, that's just till you get your sleep sorted out. So your body needs to know what's expected of it when. So have a consistent schedule. In terms of caffeine, go easy and go early on your caffeine. Caffeine has a big impact in terms of, people have different levels of sensitivity, and it can affect your ability to fall asleep that night. So be careful there. With your stimulants, with your alcohol, look, it's really easy when you're sleep deprived to think, I just need a glass of wine, that will just help
knock me out.
Yeah, but while that will knock you out, what happens is that it disrupts the architecture of your sleep, and you'll have fragmented sleep. So that's not helpful. So again, if you do want to drink in the evening, just have a smaller amount and have it earlier in the evening. And I like what these sleep hygiene things, they're not saying don't have coffee and don't. It's like, let's just sort of tweak this a little bit, shall we? Exercise is really helpful, but get it in during the day rather than trying to do cardio at night. That gets your body all revved up, so it makes it harder because your body's falling asleep with a dropping temperature. So your cardio tends to get your body temperature up. So that's not helpful. If you exercise in the evening, go for something low-key, go for a walk or do some yoga, those sorts of things. What else is there? Oh, in terms of what you eat in the evening, just avoid really spicy food or really heavy, rich food later in the evening, because that means that your body's busy trying to deal with that rather than enabling it to fall asleep. So those are the things around your daily schedule. And then in terms of what you do with your bedroom environment, it's just about making sure that that's a place that is conducive to sleep. So keep it cool, keep it dark, keep it quiet, ventilate the room, and reserve that room for sleep, so that it's associated with sleep rather than wakeful activities. Yeah. And we were talking about before, a bit tricky during lockdown when we were working in our bedrooms.
Well, I know a lot of us have, some of us do have, home offices and bedrooms, and, it's just if you're in a small house, that may be the only room of the house where you can do a meeting if you want. What about, I guess, the impact of digital technology on sleep? A lot of us, there's that whole screen time before bed thing. Does that have a really bad impact on sleep as well? Because I've read articles that suggest it, but
it certainly does. It's really unhelpful. So one of the key processes that matters when it comes to our sleep is that's our body clock, and our body clock is driven by light. So melatonin is a hormone that makes us feel sleepy, and so you want your naturally produced melatonin to be high at night and low in the morning. So we call it a Dracula hormone because it comes out at night. And so when light comes into your eyes, and then the melatonin will be reduced. If you are putting light from a screen in your eyes at night time, you are suppressing your melatonin, and that's the thing that you need to make you feel sleepy to fall asleep. So not helpful.
I guess even that could go as far as, the lighting choices that you make in your home in the evening. I'm a fan of sort of those warm, dim lights in my house in the evening, which, the strength of that light could either hinder or harm health as well.
Absolutely. I was working with a secondary school recently in their boarding establishment, and they had a look at what was going on with their kids' sleep, and it was they needed to make some adjustments. And one of the things that they decided to do was to dim the lights earlier. And one of the house directors came back the following week going, I don't believe what just happened. All I did was dim the lights and the kids just revved down. And they didn't even know that we were doing anything around sleep. It was just to make some adjustments to the environment, that we're working with biology rather than against it.
Wow, that's so interesting.
So it's just trying to line up with what's actually happening with day and night. It's like, get back. We are part of nature. It's start lining our biology back with what we're supposed to be doing, rather than going, I'm mankind, I can do what I want when I want.
So I've got a couple of questions that have come through that I'll address now. Keep them coming in, by the way. They're absolutely fantastic. So do you recommend earplugs or eye masks? Do they hinder natural sleep patterns, and should we avoid being reliant on external things like that?
I think it's a matter of trial and error. If what we know is that we need to keep that bedroom environment quiet, and we need to keep it dark. Not all of us can go and splash out on the best blackout curtains available. It's just like, get an eye mask if it's comfortable, if it's doing the job. Absolutely, that is really helpful. And it's the same with the earplugs. And also the white noise can be helpful for some people as well.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that, because how does that work? Because I've on occasions I have used it and I've found it somewhat successful, and I know many parents of newborns will have the white noise shusher machine. Does that somehow change our brainwaves, or how? Do you know how it works? Because I've always wondered.
Tricky question. You have to Google
that. Look, when I had my eldest boy, he was a terrible sleeper as a newborn, and look, the first 18 months of his life were very much helped by the white noise machine, and I'm sure a lot of parents have that same experience. Another question just on sleep hygiene is, do you have any recommendations on how long before you go to bed should you start avoiding screens?
The rule of thumb is about an hour, and I meant to say before with the screens, it's not just about the blue light that is affecting you, it's also the mental stimulation. And so it's so keep that hour before bed completely screen free. And even prior to that, think about what you're choosing to watch. Is it stuff that's getting you really mentally stimulated and jacked up, because that's not helpful for you. And what I've found with the people that I coach is that one of the really common things is that we have forgotten how to wind down without a screen. Using a screen is the default because it is so convenient. It's so easy. We don't have to think. It's just there. And, I think that's why they're so successful, is that they have tapped into how to create habits, so there is no thought. And so we have to quite conscientiously figure out, well, how do I relax without a screen? How do I wind down? What relaxes this particular body?
Yeah.
And you do actually have to give some serious time to figure out, well, how do I relax? What do I find soothing and calming and relaxing? And then once you've figured that out, you've got to make those things visible and available and totally easy.
But again, I think that comes back down to setting those really healthy routines, and it's not just a one-off, it's patterns.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One more just on sleep hygiene, because it's quite a good one. My husband sleeps badly, but he falls asleep in front of the TV quite early. Should he just go to bed when he's sleepy?
Well, that's a really interesting observation, because one of the things with people that have sleep difficulties and have created an unhelpful relationship with their bed is that they'll start falling asleep other places. And so you'll find you fall asleep fine on the couch, but then when you transfer to bed, you go, oh, I can't sleep, because you've got that negative association with the bed. So without knowing a little bit more about this particular situation, it's hard to provide suggestions. But the other thing that might be happening is that, yes, he is sleepy and he needs to go to bed. And it's really important to understand the distinction between being tired and being sleepy.
Okay, I'm gonna press you on this one because I think it's a really interesting point. What is the distinction between being tired and sleepy? Because I use those words almost interchangeably.
And it's helpful to start teasing them out and using them more discerningly. So when you feel tired, it's things like you feel physically drained, you're exhausted, you're wrecked, you've got no energy, or you're mentally drained. It's that kind of realm. So you can be tired but not able to fall asleep. So when you're sleepy, that is your body telling you it's time to go to sleep. And this is where micro sleeps come in as well. So some of the symptoms of being sleepy are you've got dry eyes, so you start rubbing your eyes, you start yawning, and the old head nod. Now, those ones are the giveaways. If you've got any of that going on, you are sleepy. And what that means is that your sleep pressure has built to such a point that your body is giving you signals going, get yourself to bed.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now I had one more sleep hygiene question. You mentioned being cooler at night is one of the triggers for a healthy sleep, but you also talked about having a hot bath. What's the story there?
Yeah, so
having a hot bath, sorry, being good for sleep potentially.
It's about your body temperature dropping.
Yes. So does a hot bath encourage your body temperature to drop in response to the hot water or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's your temperature coming down so that you can go to sleep. Yeah. And this is why, that heat thing, that's why it's so hard to sleep in the summertime when we're overheating, or, during menopause when there's hot flushes or night sweats. It's just like, your body, it can't do it. It can't do its sleep.
Yeah. Wow. That's super interesting.
And that's helpful to know. It's just like, oh, okay, well, this isn't going to work until I get my body cool. So it's like, rather than fight it and give yourself a hard time about not falling asleep, it's just going, oh, this is a temperature thing.
Yeah.
Let me deal with the temperature calmly. Let me calmly deal with this temperature problem, and then we'll see what happens.
Wow. Okay. I want to, because we've got a few questions on workplace issues, and I want to talk about the workplace in the remaining time that we have. So, what steps can workplaces take to create, I guess, a sleep-friendly workplace, for the lack of a better term, or a workplace that supports the sleep health of their employees?
I think one of the key things that can be done is raising awareness of sleep and the importance of sleep. And it's bringing it into the conversation, because, as I said earlier on, there's a bit of silence around sleep, and it's quite a sleeplessness, and there's it's very easy to feel alone in that. So having sleep as part of the conversation, of your wellbeing conversations, that's really important. Also, if you are doing any wellbeing surveys, make sure that the questions are included around sleep, and make sure that those questions are ones that are going to be useful to you. So we know that, one-off nights of poor sleep are, that's just part of life. We want to be able to identify those people that are having a rough time and need some support. And you have to be careful how you frame those questions, obviously, because, you want people to actually be able to tell the truth without feeling like they're, setting themselves up. And then it's about providing, sleep education is really important, and it's getting beyond just those, quick tips. Here is the sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
It's that next layer of information, so that people can go, oh, actually, I think I've got a problem that I need to go and see the GP about, or I think I've got insomnia. There are steps that I need to be taking to help myself, and where do I go for help around that? So it's just changing the conversation from here are the quick tips, and yes, we should all sleep, to, right, let's try and understand sleep. How can we do things differently in future?
Thanks for tuning in today. It's been great to have you along. If you're looking for more ideas to help you break burnout culture in your workplace and improve your own well-being, head to rowellbeing.com for resources, insights and more. That's rowwellbeing.com. If you're already part of our community, thanks again, and I can't wait to catch up with you really soon.